Good morning everyone. Today I will discuss about the third ventricle. In previous classes I have discussed about the lateral ventricle. They are the two lateral ventricle, and these two lateral ventricle are located in the two half of the cerebral hemisphere, that is the right and the left cerebral hemisphere. Now I am in the ventricle, and these ventricle are situated inside the brain. The third ventricle, the lateral ventricle, and the fourth ventricle. The third ventricle in between the two thalami, and the fourth ventricle in between the pons and the medulla, and anteriorly and the cerebellum posteriorly. The fourth ventricle is situated. The third ventricle, it is the slit-like space, and it in between the two thalami. It is a slit-like narrow space in between the two thalami. That is the third ventricle. The third ventricle. I will discuss the third ventricle. Then what is this third ventricle? It is the slit-like. This third ventricle is a slit-like narrow space. It is the slit-like narrow space of Densiphylon, and it is situated between the it is the slit-like narrow space of the Densiphylon, and it is situated between the two thalami. This is the two thalami. In between the two thalami it is situated. And what is Densiphylon? Densiphylon, it is the part of forebrain. The brain has the three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. And the forebrain, it includes the cerebral hemisphere and the Densiphylon, and the midbrain and the hindbrain, it includes the pons, medulla, and the cerebellum. And what is Densiphylon? It is the part of the forebrain, that is the thalamus. That is the thalamus, the epithalamus, and the hypothalamus. Which regulate our temperature, that is the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the epithalamus. Now the third ventricle has the communication with the lateral ventricle, and lateral and third ventricle also communicates with the fourth ventricle. Now this third ventricle communicates with right and left lateral ventricle, right and the left lateral ventricle through a foramen, that is the interventricular foramen. The foramen name is interventricular foramen. And the third ventricle communicates with fourth ventricle through aqueduct of Salvius or cerebral aqueduct. Through aqueduct of Salvius or cerebral aqueduct. The cerebral aqueduct and the aqueduct of the Salvius. The interventricular foramen. The third ventricle, it is communicated with the right and the left lateral ventricle through an interventricular foramen, and the third ventricle, it communicates with the fourth ventricle through a aqueduct of Salvius or the cerebral aqueduct. Now the cavity of the third ventricle, this cavity of third ventricle, it is situated in midline. It is situated in the midline in between the two thalami. So it has two lateral wall. The two lateral wall, anterior wall, the posterior wall, the roof and the floor, as it is situated in between the two thalami. So it has the two lateral wall, the anterior wall, the posterior wall, the roof and the floor. That is the third ventricle. Now this anterior wall is formed, we can easily understood the different wall of the third ventricle with the diagram by the sagittal section of the cerebral hemisphere. Now this anterior wall is formed by the lamina terminalis. The term is the lamina terminalis. The commissure, that is the anterior commissure, and the anterior column of, not the posterior column, the anterior column of the fornix, that is the anterior wall. The lamina terminalis, the anterior commissure and the anterior column of the fornix. Now the posterior wall, how this posterior wall is formed? The posterior wall, it is formed from above downward, it is formed by the, first is the suprapineal recess, second is the habenular commissure, the term is habenular commissure, the third is the pineal recess in the stalk of pineal gland, the pineal recess in stalk of pineal gland, and fourth is the posterior commissure, fourth is the posterior commissure. The suprapineal recess, the habenular commissure, the pineal recess in the stalk of pineal gland, and fourth is the posterior commissure, that is the posterior wall. And we can see, we can understood easily with the help of this diagram, the anterior wall, the posterior wall. This is the corpus callosum. We have, this is the diagram of the sagittal section of the cerebral hemisphere, as the third ventricle, it is situated in between the two thalami, and both the cerebral hemisphere are connected with the corpus callosum, and we take the sagittal section along the corpus callosum, and we see the sagittal section of the cerebral hemisphere. And this sagittal section of the cerebral hemisphere, in the sagittal section we see the corpus callosum. This is the corpus callosum, and it is the four part, the perineum, body, genu and the rostrum, and this is the membrane like a structure, that is the septum pellucidum in between the fornix and the corpus callosum, and this is the choroid plexus of the lateral ventricle. The choroid plexus, here is the choroid plexus, this is the interthalamic adhesion, this is the thalamus, this is the hypothalamus, and this is the interventricular foramen. The interventricular foramen, the third ventricle, it is connected with the lateral ventricle with the interventricular foramen. This is the interthalamic adhesion, this is the hypothalamus, and this is the sulcus, that is the hypothalamus sulcus. This is the choroid plexus, this is the habenular commissure, the pineal body, and above the pineal body the pineal recess is situated. This is the posterior commissure. In the anterior wall there is the anterior commissure, the lamina terminalis, and the anterior column of the fornix, and this is the hypothalamus, this is the anterior wall. Thus the anterior wall, it is formed by the lamina terminalis, the anterior commissure and the anterior column of the fornix, and the posterior wall, it is formed by the suprapineal recess, the habenular commissure, the pineal recess in the stalk of the pineal body, and the posterior commissure. This is the posterior commissure, this is the anterior wall, and this is the posterior wall. And how the floor of this third ventricle is formed? The floor is formed by the optic chiasma, the infundibulum, then the tuber cinereum. This is the tuber cinereum. Then the mammillary body. This is the mammillary body. The posterior perforated substance and the tegmentum of the midbrain. This is the tegmentum of the midbrain, from which the third ventricle, the wall of this third ventricle is formed. The floor of the third ventricle is formed. In the figure, I have shown the floor of this third ventricle, that is the optic chiasma, the infundibulum, the tuber cinereum, the mammillary body, posterior perforated substance, and the tegmentum of the midbrain. Now roof, how this roof is formed? We have taken the coronal section of the brain showing the roof of the fourth ventricle. This is the corpus callosum, and this is the central part of the lateral ventricle, and this is the thalmi. In between the two thalmi, this third ventricle is situated. This is the hypothalamus. It is the coronal section of the brain showing the central part of the lateral and the third ventricle. This is the caudate nucleus, the stria terminalis, and thalmostriate vein. The roof is formed. How this roof is formed? It is formed by the ependyma. This is the formed by the ependyma. Roof is formed by the ependyma situated between the two thalmi. This is the ependyma lining. This is the ependyma lining, and it is formed by the ependyma that is stretching between the two thalmi. And from the roof, the choroid plexus. This is the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus protrude on either side of the median plane. This is the median plane. Now the subterm are, what is the tuber cinereum? What is tuber cinereum? This is the tuber cinereum. In the diagram, I have showing the tuber cinereum. What is tuber cinereum? It is the part of the hypothalamus and through which the pituitary gland is attached. That is the tuber cinereum. What is the posterior perforated substance? It is the triangular area of the grey matter. This is the posterior perforated substance. It is the grey matter located within the interpendicular fossa. Next term is infundibulum. It is the funnel-shaped structure that connect the hypothalamus with the pituitary gland. This is the connect the hypothalamus with the pituitary gland. That is the infundibulum. It is the funnel-shaped structure that connect the hypothalamus with the pituitary gland. This is all about the third ventricle. Thank you.